welcome back to another episode of Wealth Talk. My name's Christian Rodwell, the Membership Director of WealthBuilders, and joined as always by Mr. Kevin Whelan.
Hello, Chris. Nice to see you again.
Good to see you, Kevin. Now, back in episode 3, I asked you what your definition of wealth was. Mm-hmm. And you gave a great definition. And if you didn't catch that, definitely rewind, check out episode 3 now. But today I'm going to ask you for a different definition. And that is an important one, which is the definition of an asset.
Oh, now that's an important one, Chris. Very, very important. Before I give you the definition of an asset, Chris, I'd like to give a distinction which will lead on to that. And that's the 2 different types of income one can earn. One is called work income, and that's when you trade your time for money. And that's obviously easy to identify if you've got a job or if you're self-employed and you're running some kind of a business where you're cooking it, shipping it, selling it, doing the whole thing. That's trading time for money. And that's called work income. And it kind of sounds different as well. We're on a podcast. Why don't we make it audible? It sounds different. It's like work 30 times or 20 times in a month, get paid. 20 times work, get paid. 20 times work. And that's the cycle, right? The difference that I'd like to point out, which will then come to the asset, is asset income. Now, asset income is income that flows from something that we will now have the definition and then show the difference between the two. So an asset is something you own. Get the ownership. That is not you. Now, you don't own a job, so it can't be an asset. Can't pass your job on to your kids, last time I looked. Something you own that is not you. It puts money in your bank account while you're asleep. You don't have to show up for the money to show up. You can pass that money on to anybody you wish to, good causes, your family, and so on. You do not have to be there for the money to be there. That's the definition of an asset to me. So if you own assets, then the ownership of the asset, which throws off income, whether it throws off rent, whether it throws off dividends, whether it throws off royalties, whatever the income that flows from the ownership of your assets, it's permanent. It isn't temporary. So therefore, if you have asset income, it continues to flow. So you do the work, and often you have to work very hard. So you do the work, but you get paid, get paid, get paid, get paid. Shall I keep going? Get paid, get paid. It doesn't stop. Yes, you have to put a little bit of management in place. And let's be clear, you cannot be wealthy without being in the wealth management business. You have to manage your wealth. But it's easy to delegate that. Or if you love doing it, manage it yourself. And certainly, if you look back to the previous episode when we talked about passing on the wealth to the next generation, you need to give the stewardship skills, the skills of wisdom to the next generation so they manage and expand the wealth as well for the generations to come. So what I would say in episode 1, I think we talked about the importance of being an entrepreneur and that you can only be truly wealthy if you're part of the value creation process, which is really what an entrepreneur is. Wealth then is the managing of your asset income as opposed to your work income. So nobody gets rich by having work income because it ends when you start working. The wealth comes from owning assets. And in another episode, we'll go step by step into the 7 different assets you can own. And what's great about it, Chris, is there are only 7. They're not 8, there are 7.
Easy to remember.
Easy to remember. And once you've got the 7 locked in and you work out which ones are most relevant to you, when you've worked out what your target income is, to be financially independent or financially secure, you can work out which assets are most likely to suit you and then how you build them step by step by step. It all takes care of itself.
And when we share those 7 assets, refer to them as 7 pillars. You
7
break
pillars,
it down
yeah.
even into a 3 and a 4 to make it even easier to remember. But we'll save that for another day.
Save that for another day. But actually, it's an important visual. So we've just done an audible, what work income sounds like, But also think about the visual of anybody who hasn't checked us out yet at the Wealth Builder website can see if they were looking at that the logo of Wealth Builders is a foundation, a plinth almost, a foundation, like a building, 7 pillars, which are the 7 assets, and a roof. And they're the 3 kind of principal things that we share and teach. And I think probably it would be a good idea to start with the foundation today, Chris, because you cannot get above ground. So some people will be listening, will be struggling maybe, they even having the work income is not giving them enough freedom to be able to build assets, to be able to sack their boss in your language, or get out of the rat race, or just simply move themselves to a place of complete financial security. Then let's get them above ground. Let's put that foundation in place and show them what to do. Why don't we talk about that?
Yeah, because in the last episode 3, we talked about the 5 levels of wealth. Mm-hmm. If you didn't catch that, absolutely, you must go back now, check that out. And we talked about the first level being insecurity.
Insecurity, yeah.
So many people do find themselves at a point where if they lost that one source of income that typically is a job, there wouldn't be any other money flowing in.
Correct.
So where do they begin? We talked about something in the last episode. You mentioned the word debits.
Debits, yeah.
So what does debits stand
Well, debits is it's my kind of mnemonic acronym, whatever term you want to use, which goes through all of the different points that anybody can self-check. So in the concept of a bit of self-diagnosis at the beginning, or they can come and get some help. And let's give them some help now. There are, each of those letters stands for an area where they could have a little closer look at what's going on in their financial life and make some changes that will reveal some cash. It always does. And if you reveal cash that you didn't know existed before, it uncovers money that you don't need to carry on spending. Now, let's be clear, Chris. I don't mean stop having a cappuccino. I don't mean penny pinching. I'm not talking about budgeting. I'm not talking about a diet. I'm not talking about pain. I'm talking about some common sense things people can do that if they go through it and do it once a year, only once a year, then they will find money and they can put that money to good use. So instead of that money sitting idle, doing nothing, festering in a bank account, they put that money to work to start the process of building assets.
That reminds me, we did a WealthBuilders workshop. It was about 2-3 years now, maybe. And there was an exercise. We had 2 groups, split the room into 2 groups. And the purpose of that exercise was to prove or to show that you really can't save your way to wealth, can you?
You cannot save your way to wealth. When you look at how much can you save, you can't shrink your way into wealth. You have to expand your way into wealth. And that expansion comes from finding money that you didn't realize you could use and put that money to work and make leverage from that, make much bigger and stronger things happening. So why don't we dive into that?
6, so let's get going. What's D stand for, Kevin?
Well, D stands for debt. And, we know debt is all pervasive in the economy right now, and more so, and I'm sad to say, for students. Never before. I went to university, didn't pay anything for it. I've got 3 kids all gone through university, and one of them didn't end up paying, but the other 2 did end up paying. Actually, they didn't because I paid, but that's not the issue. The point is, debt is a big cost. It's a drain. It's a brake. It's a drag on people's money, because the thing about debt is no matter what happens with debt, when it's bad debt that's costing you in life as opposed to debt that's expanding your life. We won't have time to talk today, I don't think, about good debt and bad debt, leveraged debt and unleveraged debt. Let's just talk about how to eliminate debt, how to reduce debt. And I've written a book on this, Chris, called Save a Fortune.
Very good book it is too, Kevin.
Thank you very much. How to completely eliminate your mortgage, loans and credit cards fast. Okay, so I paid off my mortgage in 7 years flat, and then that gave me a sense of enormous financial good foundation, because it means you don't have a mortgage payment. So if you don't have a mortgage payment, you're not worried about interest rates. And in debits then, and in the book and in other lessons that we'll put onto the membership website, there are a whole host of different things that you can do to reduce the cost of debt, eliminate high-cost consumer debt, tactics you can use to find ways to make that debt payment gradually diminish. So both in the short term for immediate feeling of having more disposable money to the long-term cost of mortgage debt and anything else in between. There's 12 strategies in the book that we can teach people that they can use at least one of them to reduce the cost of debt and therefore put more money in their life. And if you put that money to work on building assets, and we show them which ones to build, then they can start their wealth building journey from there.
That's the idea, isn't it? It's that this extra money you're saving, you're not then going out and spending it and having a holiday, you're putting it to work.
Well, there's nothing wrong with having a holiday if you need a holiday, but I'm saying if you find that you've made a saving, put some of it towards the holiday and the life that you're enjoying now, and some of it towards your wealth. And there's a whole argument, isn't there, about making sure that in everybody's outgoings, there's at least a portion of that money earmarked for the wealth building side of their life. And I think we refer to that in one of our lessons in the various jars, I think it is, Chris.
I believe so. So we've hopefully saved a little bit of money just by looking at the debt and managing that in a more effective way. What does E of debit stand for?
Well, E is education. And while I'm not suggesting there's a way to save on university education and so on, but education is an important aspect in wealth building. And we talked about that in episode 1, that the foundation, the very starting point of all wealth building is getting a good education in wealth building, not in academic education, not the drifters drifting from one bit of education to the next. And there's a way to get education for free or significantly reduced by connection with WealthBuilders. Let's give a couple of examples about that. So we're a community-based outfit, aren't we? We've got lots of our members, so we've got some very strong and seasoned, experienced people in all aspects of wealth building and assets, like property as an example. And many of them will offer a significant discount for members of WealthBuilders to access education at a lower cost. But there's another way to do that too. So in one of the wealth building areas that we help people to do better on, Chris, which is one of the subjects you've raised before, where you first heard me speak, and it's this horrible word of pensions, right? So, pensions being the glum, the grey, the dreary side of wealth building, but it's an important one because for many people, it's the only way they're building their retirement wealth. So they're having to wait for many, many years to get it. So they kind of park that money and leave it there. But there's a way to capture that money, to bring that money into your control today. And once you've got control of that, there's a special type of a pension that allows you to do that. And once you have that, you can use that money in the pension to pay for education that helps you build more wealth. So instead of having to pay to get education, remember I spoke about the ROI, return on intellect?
Yes.
You become smarter by being engaged in your own wealth process. So if you can find a way that your pension that gets tax relief, so the government are paying, that you can use to get an education to help you build your wealth even further, how about that as a suggestion? And we can show people how to do that.
Wow. So we're only 2 down. I'm already feeling a little bit wealthier.
I hope so.
Let's move on to the third one, B.
B. Well, B is not quite as sexy because B means you've got to get your bank statements out, get a highlighter pen out or a spreadsheet out and get your cursor out and start looking at the bills. So B stands for bills, Chris, bills that you're spending in life. And again, I encourage everybody at least once a year to take a long, hard look at what they're doing, what they're spending, and see if there's something that's in your life that just doesn't need to be there anymore. I recently spent a day at home, Chris, and my wife made me declutter. Right? I had to get rid of a number of suits and a number of shirts and a number of different things. And I had to wave them all goodbye and touch them and say, you've served me well in the past, but no longer. Apply that very same thoughts to things that you used to use. Is there something in your life that was important, that you are spending money, but you can either get it cheaper? There's a whole raft of, websites and comparison sites. Yeah. That you can get anything cheaper if you shop around for it. And that's a skill that you can use. And whenever you find a saving, take some of that saving and put it in the jar to enjoy life, but take some of that saving to reduce your debt maybe, or take some of that saving to build an asset. And the simplest asset to build right at the very start is just simply to use very low cost tracker funds, which cost almost nothing, very, very low cost to start at least the feeling that you're seeing something accumulating in your life. Now, I'm not advocating the stock market is the best place to build wealth, certainly not, but it's one of the places that it's the easiest to start because it's so liquid, it's so cheap to get access easily, and you don't need to be paying high cost fees for advisory fees or fund manager fees when you're using things like exchange traded funds or ETFs for short. Very simple ways to get access, and then much cheaper now when you're shopping around to do that. And there are a whole range of things that you would look at in your bills, and there's always something you can find that you just didn't need to be spending, or something you can reduce the cost and then put that money to good use.
Yeah, often subscriptions that are no longer needed and things such as that. Okay, so we've looked at debt, we've looked at education, bills just there. Mm-hmm. What does the I stand for, Kevin?
Well, I stands for the word insurance. Now, everybody's insuring something, and we talked about comparison sites, didn't we? So it's easy to insure and check the insurance costs of things like cars and houses and so on. But do you remember I mentioned a little while ago the subject of getting tax relief and using that tax relief to get an education? Well, you can also use tax relief if you're a business owner, so not everybody is, but it's easy to start creating a business, isn't it, really, today? Mm-hmm. And if you have a business, you can get tax relief on the payment of life insurance. So instead of paying for that out of after-tax money, you can pay for it with pre-tax money. And because you can buy it then and the government's paid a contribution to the premium, then it's saving you money. Also, the other thing that I see a lot, when you're looking at the difference between what's important to you, wealth building or just securing something that's really not massively important in your life. I believe in insurance, by the way, that insurance for really important things, critical things, you should have. So insurance, if you've got debt, make sure if something happens to you, you paid your insurance, the insurance pays the debt off. If you get seriously ill, make sure you've got something, because sometimes people who lose their jobs because they're ill not only lose the income, but they lose the capacity to go off and create another income. But this is not to advocate insurance in any great way, but just to say you can save money on it. And sometimes things that really shouldn't be insured, Chris, are insured. iPhone insurance, insurance on your laptop.
Washing
machines, the sort of things that salesmen sell that maybe you just didn't have the time to check whether you were paying it, or maybe you just did because it was easy. But if you think about it, it costs you $10 a month to insure your iPhone when, it's not the end of the world if you use your iPhone. You can always replace that, but that money could be used to either eliminate debt or build wealth. You can just think about different ways to do that.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So that moves on to T.
Well, T is a biggie. T is tax. And part of the challenge with the whole concept of tax is it's all pervasive. There's income tax, there's VAT, there's corporation tax, capital gains tax, inheritance tax, stamp duty tax.
They say the two things in life you can be certain of.
Well, yeah, quite. And, what's interesting about tax is always a fascinating thing for me, which is, as an economist, one of the most famous economists, Adam Smith, has an institute. And that Adam Smith Institute has a day which it posts sort of a calendar date, which I think this year was May 20-something, late May, wasn't it, anyway?
Yeah.
So let's say it's May 25th, just to pick a number, but it's about that. That's the day that you stop paying taxes and the rest of the year is your money.
Isn't that just absolutely shockingly scary?
So do you think it's possible that with a bit of education, with a bit of support, with a bit of connection, is possible to reduce some of the tax burden, to eliminate some taxes or reduce some taxes? And it absolutely is. And one of the important things that I think I've heard definitely come out of Robert Kiyosaki's writings in Rich Dad, Poor Dad was that employed people earn money, pay their tax, and they have at their leisure to spend what's left. If you're in business, you earn money, you can spend that money, and you pay tax on what's left. So a business owner can enjoy things that is part of their life, legitimate things that they can use and claim tax relief on and still enjoy them, like cars and like, if I want to go on a trip to somewhere to go on a conference, I can claim that provided it's a legitimate expense and so on. And if I want to get training to learn how to be, better in fund management because I'm a trustee of my own pension, mentioned that earlier on, then I can claim that from my pension fund. So there are ways you can claim money back. So there's a whole army of tactics and skills that you can deploy to reduce taxes here and there. And that's all part of the wider connection that we have with experts in property and in business and in just simple things people can do to ensure that they've got, the maximum use of tax within husband and wife, for example. So there are many things you can do to reduce taxes, and we're all keen to help that, because if you reduce your tax, it puts more money in your life.
We play the Cash Flow 101 game every month in London, as you know. So if anyone is familiar with Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but hasn't played the Cash Flow game, then definitely find out when the next game is by heading on over to wealthbuilders.co.uk/WealthTalk. Make sure all the links to everything that we're talking about in the show are on that page for you. So let's move into the final, which is S of debits.
Yeah.
What does S stand for, Kim?
Well, S stands for support. Now, you realize that all through our discussions, Chris, there's a common thread. And that common thread is the need for education, the need for good support. What I mean by good support is support that's unbiased, support that's focused on an outcome for you, not for them. Support that you can see and is absolutely focused on trying to do the best thing for you. And what I find that support generally in the way people are building their wealth in things like stocks and shares, their pension funds, the support costs, the people who are involved in that, custodian fees, advisor fees,
talking IFA type,
fund manager fees. I'm not saying all IFAs are bad. Of course they're not. They're just trying to do their best. But there's a conflict of interest which is unstated, which if you think about it this way, if the vast majority of the 95% who are trying to build their wealth on the stock market, and the custodians, the fund managers and the IFAs or the advisors are all trying to make money off your money, and you're trying to make money off your money, there's something that's not going to work. And the average cost that people are paying for the combination of those three fees is about 2% per annum.
Which
doesn't sound a lot.
Might not sound a lot.
It's only going to cost you 2%. Yeah. But the average return is about 6%. Now, I don't know about you, Chris, but that's an interesting kind of idea.
33% sounds quite hefty.
Hold on, let's just replay this. So you're going to pay, unless you choose differently, a third of your money to somebody who has no stake in that. So in other words, you put all the money in, they didn't put any. You take all the risk, they take none. And then if things go wrong, which they did massively in 2008, and will again, who knows what's going to happen. As we're talking today, we're on the Brexit brink. So we don't know really what's going to happen there and the uncertainty there. But if something goes wrong, they're not accountable. So with no accountability, no risk, and no involvement, you can see there's a conflict of interest. And I wouldn't sign a third of my money away to somebody who didn't have a stake in it. And I don't think everybody else should too. So we're absolutely advocating that people should get involved more in the self-management of their money. And remember I said to you in an earlier episode, Chris, that when you decide to become wealthy, you're in the wealth management business. So get in the wealth management business early. Make a decision about where your costs really are. Look behind the statement, because you don't see these charges. They're hidden. They're opaque. And the way I phrase it is someone sticking a siphon in your bank account, except it's your investment bank account. You're not seeing it. You would see it if you got the highlighter pen out, right? If it was in your personal bank account and somebody was taking a couple of £1,000 a year out of you, you'd see it, but you don't see it when it's hidden from you. And I encourage people to understand their fees, to challenge those fees, to check if they're getting good value for those fees. And if you combine the debt, the education, the bills, the insurance, the tax and the support costs, I would challenge anybody not to find a significant sum. The challenge isn't if the money's there. The challenge, are you willing to do it? And this is where the drifters come in. The drifters will say, oh, I'll get round to it. I'll think about that. That's a really good idea. I listened to the podcast about debits, but did they do it? No, they didn't. And that's why they will continue in that cycle of remaining insecure financially, possibly for the rest of their life. Their incomes will go up, of course. But tragically, when they lose that job through health or through redundancy or through retirement, the tragic fact is their income will drop massively. And that did not need to happen. So we're encouraging the DIYers to do a bit, and those who are interested in being dynamic for us to help them, we can help them to really uncover all of the things rather than just discovering what they discover on their own. That's debits.
That's fantastic. And whilst we position that as really being a good, jumpstart for those looking to move from level 1 of insecurity to level 2 of security, really this is applicable to everyone.
It's just revisiting your foundation. In a building, if you picture that building again with the good foundation and the 7 pillars in the roof, but if you have a damp course, and the damp's rising, that's going to undermine that foundation. So, in the same way, this is water is leaking. And in this case, if you don't take care of your debits, you're going to be losing money, and money will be leaking out of your life. And if you can plug those leaks, then the levels will rise, and you can use that money to build your wealth. And I would encourage everybody, wherever they are, to start right there.
So an annual check would be a good idea to review those debits.
Well, yeah, just like, you're forced to do that with your car.
Yeah.
A
personal MOT, a health
check.
It's a money check almost.
You could do it yourself, or you can engage with somebody to do that. Just recognize that if the benefit is to make more money than you ever spend in the support costs with somebody else who can help you do that, then it's worth its weight in gold.
Yeah. We've actually recorded, or I should say you've recorded, a summary video of debits. So we can make that available as well for those listening right now. I think we've gone into a bit more detail here on the podcast, but for anyone who likes the visual aspect, we do have a video as well, don't we?
Okay, that's great.
Good stuff. Thanks, Kevin. That was great. So we're going to move on and see you guys in a future episode of Wealth Talk. Thank you.
Thank you very much.